Welcome to Anita Talks Genealogy and History. I am so pleased that you all could join us today. And today I'm talking about my great-grandmother, Adriana Darby, who is my paternal great-grandmother. She was the mother of my grandmother, Annie Bonaparte-Baxter, and Adriana Darby married a Bonaparte, and she married Isaac Bonaparte, my great-grandfather, and she was a South Carolina Beaver Creek Indian. And this information I am attributing to my cousin Frank McCracken, Reverend Frank McCracken, who lives in Reading, Pennsylvania. And this is information that he just shared with me, and now I'm sharing it with you. But we have all been searching and trying to find the answers and reconnect what was stolen from us in our family. But before I begin, please hit that like button, please hit that subscribe button, and share this information. And if you have any comments that or questions, please feel free to ask, and keep it civil, because I'm keeping it civil. Hey, and continue to to support and share this channel. Our history should not be a mystery. And when I say that, I mean Afro-indigenous people. Our history should not be a mystery. So they want to make it so that it's hard for us to trace back to where we came from, and say that you don't know where you came from. We're from Europe, when wherever we came from in Africa was more civilized than Europe. And thanks to Africa, Europe became somewhat civilized. Unfortunately, the ones that were not civilized wound up colonizing the rest of the civilized world. Anyway, so I'm talking about my ancestor, because when I'm sharing, I like to share what I know, what I have experienced, what's in my family lines, because a lot of us have similar things. But when you share it from your, research and perspective, it means a lot more than just reading it out of a book or, Anyway, but Adriana, great-grandmother Adriana Darby, was described as a tall woman with long black hair, and she smoked a corn cob pipe. That's how one of our cousins described her, because they remembered her. And I know that her daughter, lived to be over 100 years old, and she was a Caldwell. She married a Caldwell, but she was a Bonaparte from South Carolina. And so these Beaver Creek Indians were melanated, dark-skinned black people. They were indigenous peoples from the Americas, shipped out of the country and returned. Yes, indigenous people from the Americas, including those with darker skin tones, often referred to as melanated, were forcibly shipped out of the continent, and some did eventually return. This was primarily a result of the transatlantic slave trade and colonial policy spanning from the 15th to the 19th centuries. The trafficking of indigenous people was often separate from, but sometimes intertwined with the trafficking of enslaved Africans. Yes, indigenous people from the Americas, including those with darker skin tones, often referred to melanated, were forcibly shipped out of the continent and returned. And the colonizers, there were no rules and there were no laws. They did what they wanted to do, and they brought a lot of lawlessness to this continent, which is the Americas. And the forced removal and enslavement consisted of places like shipping them to various destinations, including the Caribbean. English colonists in New England and Carolina sent Native American captives to places like Barbados, Bermuda, and Jamaica, where they were forced to labor on sugar plantations. And I also want to include in Antigua, where my ancestors, who were the Nzatago Indians, or the indigenous people from Virginia, were shipped. They were shipped to Antigua as slaves after they redesignated them from their tribal name, Nzatago, to mulatto. And so they shipped them to Europe. Christopher Columbus, on his return voyages, took Native Americans to Spain to be sold into slavery. Some also ended up in other parts of Europe, including Scotland. Other colonies, enslaved indigenous people were also transported to other colonies in Africa and across the Americas. The reasons for shipping indigenous slaves away: European colonists found it beneficial to remove indigenous slaves from their land. That way, it was easier for them to take control of the land, to remove them. And remember that they took Pocahontas and shipped her to England. And one would wonder why they would do that. But she was not the first Native person to be shipped, to be kidnapped and taken to England. There were other Native people, or indigenous people rather. Removing you from your land makes it difficult for you to escape. Local indigenous people had a deep understanding of the land, making it easier for them to escape and find refuge with allied tribes. Shipping them far away made escape and return much more difficult. And I know this is what I heard years ago when I went to Cuba, and I was told that the Arawak were shipped to Africa, to West Africa, as slaves from Cuba. So they did not all die off. And the point I want to make is that the first slaves in the Americas were the indigenous people. That is the point. And like I said, the local indigenous people were shipped away because they knew the land. And their land clearing, exporting Native Americans was a strategy to displace indigenous populations and clear the land for colonial settlement. And there was a profit motive. Selling captives to distant markets, particularly the Caribbean, was highly profitable. Instances of return. While the practice of forcibly removing Native Americans was devastating, historical records show that a small number did manage to return to their ancestral lands. And during King Philip's War, following this conflict in the 1670s, many Native Americans from New England were enslaved and sent overseas. Some who were sold to Bermuda later petitioned for their freedom, and certain individuals and their descendants eventually made it back to the United States. And there were efforts by tribal leaders, some Native American leaders and English allies actively worked to keep captives from being shipped away and help those who returned to resettle. Genetic evidence. Recent genetic studies have revealed evidence of back migrations where Native American genetic material was found in Siberia via the Bering Strait and Polynesia. However, this indicates ancient migratory patterns, not returns from colonial enslavement. Skin tone and indigenous identity. The use of the term melanated in this context is complex and requires clarification. Diversity of indigenous skin tones. Before and during colonization, indigenous people across the Americas exhibited a wide range of skin tones, influenced by factors like genetics in proximity to the sun. Subtropical tribes were darker, while those further north or in rainforests were lighter. This is the point that I continue to try to make, is that there were many phenotypes here in the Americas. Some were darker, some were lighter. It was according to the climate. North America is a continent. It goes all the way down past, to the tip of, I think it's all the way down to Panama, down to Bolivia, all the way through Brazil, all those different climates. And then it goes all the way up north to the Aleutians, where some other natives came over the Bering Strait. Some of the people came here from that area. But it was it's a continent that's porous. In other words, there were people coming from every direction into the Americas. And these people were the same. The ones that I believe came into South America were the same people that have been in Australia for 50 to 80,000 years. They didn't just stop in Australia. They were in the Solomon Islands. They're the Polynesians. They are in the Philippines. If you go up in the mountains in the Philippines, you can see who's up there. And they were also in Asia, in other regions like Asia. And of course they came here into the Americas and probably were the first people here, just like they were the first people in Australia. Okay, what they now call Australia. But don't wait for them to tell you the truth. You have to go find your own truth. And my great grandmother Adriana, and who her people were, is like, when you're looking for them, you run into a dead end, because you have to go back and look at when those native people who were displaced, and where were they displaced from, and where did they come to, So this to me is really like one of the gems of my finding for over 30 years, okay? And there's a wide range of skin tones which was influenced by factors like genetics and proximity to the sun. Some tropical tribes were darker, while those further north or in rainforests were lighter. And by the way, everybody in Africa, which is a huge continent, probably the biggest continent on this earth, is not dark skinned. Every phenotype comes out of Africa. Early European perception. Some early Spanish explorers and slave traders noted the difference of dark-skinned indigenous people, sometimes calling them negros de terra, blacks of the land, further blurring racial lines. Modern Afro-indigenous communities. The history of indigenous and African people is interconnected. Some modern Afro-indigenous communities are descended from Native Americans, enslaved Africans, and their descendants. This blending of African and indigenous ancestry means many Afro-indigenous people have darker skin tones. And this is, it's sad that we even have to talk about skin tone and why this one is lighter, or why somebody's hair is longer, the eye color, and there's one face that you can look at and say, oh, well, they're a Native American. They're the indigenous people to the land, or they're not indigenous to the land because of a look. And that, my folks, is the racism that was brought here with the colonial settlers. When the first slaves came here, it was indigenous people that were taking them in and saving them. It was indigenous people that were getting them to Canada, who showed them where the North Star was. They didn't know. And I'm saying, I'm not knocking Harriet Tubman or anybody else, but that was further down the road. I'm talking about when the first slaves came into the Americas. The native people were showing them the lay of the land. And I believe that's one of the reasons they were removing some of the native people. And I know that it's one of the reasons why they were reclassifying some of the native people, because they looked too much like these slaves that they were bringing in from Africa. So they were reclassifying them. They did not call them African. They called them mulatto, colored, Negro, but they didn't, and they might have called some of them black, because according to, how their racist eyes saw that human being, and they may have called them black. But at the same time, when I'm looking at records in Virginia, looking through the Free Negro Registry, and they're saying, oh, straight black hair, or they would talk about them as kind of olive complexion or whatever, and talking about their skin tone and black eyes, talking about black eyes, not brown eyes, black eyes. They're talking about native people, and they were describing them. And they were in, and just like they bred our people, and that's their shame, not ours. They were breeding natives with Africans. That's why they were sending them to Africa, to breed the native out of them, to get them to breed with Africans. That's what they do. They breed, they were breeding and doing whatever they could to take away the rights of the indigenous people of this land. And in South Carolina, those that they lived up in, they didn't necessarily live in the Sea Islands or that part of it. They lived up in Orangeburg, South Carolina, up there. They worked in the, they were, picking, they were rice growing. They were growing the rice and working in the rice fields. And they were, and also cotton. And so Adriana, that's the life that she lived. They were, they had to go in the fields, even, after slavery. They were sharecroppers. And her husband, who was a Bonaparte, he was one of the, a prominent sharecropper, and he had his own business. He was a businessman. So they knew how to handle money. They knew how to make money. And in order to make money, you have to have a lot of smarts, especially when you're making money around the races, because you can't outdo them. They get jealous and insecure like a little kid. So you can't have more than they do. And he managed to be successful and to raise a family, without, being lynched or being harassed by those white people in Orangeburg, South Carolina. And they, one of the people, one of our relatives on the Bonaparte side is Eartha Kitt. And her mother, was a Bonaparte. So she's one of our cousins on that side of our family. And I knew before they ever told me, when I read her book, and she said she came from South Carolina, and I just had that feeling. And then, they confirmed it Yeah, um, she was, and very little about, even today, they will not talk about who her father was. You know, they won't say it out loud. That that's the fear that um, even now in 2025, that some of the people in my family that are still in South Carolina have. You can't say that out loud, as if a rapist should be protected. Someone that took advantage of a poor black teenager who was working in their house should be protected. That's what they're doing. I mean, come on now. The Epstein files. Think about it. Think about how they protect some of these folks in our society that are nothing but pedophiles and rapists. And you know, I just find it interesting, and I'm so grateful, to Cousin Frank for sharing this with me. And he also shared some pictures with me. So I hope you'll read, what I wrote, the post that I wrote, and check out the pictures. And also, think about, the stories that our people, the old folks told, because they didn't say it out loud. But if you slow it down and think about what they said, there are clues in the stories that they're telling about our families. And I heard, like they would say, I heard, but they wouldn't say, oh, this is, the truth or nothing. But, that's the way that, they passed it down to us, because we, the younger generation are going to be more curious about, oh, what did she mean by that story she was telling? What did they mean? Grandpa was, had to leave South Carolina, and the white militia was after him in 1920, long after slavery, because he was a sharecropper on somebody else's land. And every year when he turned in that crop, they said he owed them, meaning he couldn't leave that land. He was not free until he paid them. He always, no matter what he did, at the end of the year, he owed the sharecropper, the person who owned that land. And so when he was ready to go, he said, I've got to leave. And he had to leave the county that he was in, because he was from Orangeburg County, but he had to go to an entirely different county to catch a train to Pennsylvania. And he had to hide my grandmother, Annie Bonaparte-Baxter. He had to hide her and the children in another county. They could not stay in that county because the white militia would have killed all of them. My grandfather, my grandmother, and the children. That's in 1920, Jim Crow, South Carolina. And, oh, by the way, they're bringing Jim Crow back. That's what Trump's doing when he says, make America great again. He's bringing Jim Crow back. My question is, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to send our young people to another war to fight for them to come back to no land, to no reparations, no jobs? I mean, Trump, I believe, is getting ready to go to war somewhere. But his military, they don't have enough soldiers to fight a war. So what war is he going to? Now they're trying to figure out a way to cozy up to black people and have them tell us to send our young people to war, to fight for a country that has never fought for us. Think about that. They're trying to make America great again for themselves, not for us. I don't think I have to tell, most of us this. I think most of us know this. That's why we're sitting down, minding our own black business. We're not playing their game. So let them run around and, do not believe the words that are coming out of their mouths, because they're getting ready to change the script up in order for us to sacrifice our young people for another imperialist war, maybe to go support Israel, maybe to go against Venezuela. Why would I do that? Why would my people do that when we're indigenous to the Americas and we have more in common with the leaders and the people of Venezuela and South America than we do with those Europeans? Think about it, folks. And it's just some food for thought. And I hope that you got something from this podcast. I hope that you will continue to tune in. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Don't forget to share. And if you have any comments, I would appreciate them. And thank you so much. And I will most definitely see you soon.